Hi boys and girls, Unoriginal here with another Zelda map video. Now on my last video there were some really positive responses to finding the Ocarina of Time's map within the land of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild. The reason this new video has taken so long is mostly due to the fact that I kinda debunked that previous video in every attempt I made in finding Twilight Princess's map. So I've been looking at how Twilight Princess's map could fit within the world of Breath of the Wild, and if the layout lies intact somewhere in this vast world. We managed to find Ocarina of Time alright. Now let's try and find Twilight Princess. In a much older video I found a way how Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time's maps could have matched up. I'll come back to that at some point, but won't be pursuing that theory in today's video. Much like what I did in my previous video, to find Twilight Princess's map, I started by overlaying notable landmarks and then rotating the map until we find a suitable position. My reasoning here for rotating is because while north is always prevalent in both Breath of the Wild and Twilight Princess's maps, we know that a calamity took place before Breath of the Wild started. What that was, we're not entirely clear, but I'm not dismissing the possibility that there have been a polar shift since the last time we saw Hyrule. I'm also using a map of Twilight Princess that I painstakingly traced from the game map. I only really did this so that there'd be a better quality visual for you guys rather than using a render that somebody else made. Now that we've cleared that all up, let's begin. We'll start where we did with the Ocarina of Time video, with the Temple of Time. If we rotate the map for Twilight Princess, the Temple of Time and the Twilight Princess Lake Hylia all match up. It also places Gerudo Desert in the same place I had it for Ocarina of Time, and the old Hyrule Castle sits upon Zukasa Ridge, with the inlet for the moat lining up with the Osera Plains. And Death Mountain lines up with this nameless mountain here opposite Mount this mountain here. However, all of Hyrule Field seems to be located where there are hills, and Snow Peak and the Zora's Domain lie far out in the Faron Sea. Sure, there may have been a glacier here at some point, but this configuration doesn't feel quite right, especially considering that this Temple of Time from Breath of the Wild is in much better of a state than the Twilight Princess Temple, so let's look elsewhere. Next I tried to line up Lake Hylia again with the bridge running the same way. In this configuration, Faron Woods lies over its counterpart, and the Twilight Princess Castle Ruins aligns with Squapple River. Gerudo Desert is also closer to Breath of the Wild's true location. The eastern Hyrule Field, however, lies over top of Breath of the Wild's mountainous Kakariko village, and Zora's mountainous domain sits over this reasonably flat new castle town, and Snow Peak runs across the new Hyrule Field as well. Death Mountain also sits over some unimpressive grassland, so let's try again. In an attempt to find a descendant to Twilight Princess's Lake Hylia, I looked into other lakes, and I found this with Lake Totori, which sits around Rito Village. I also had in mind the connection that the Zora who live in Lake Hylia usually have to the Rito in Wind Waker, and I kinda ran with that idea. Overlaying the map again in this fashion, we finally find a home for Snow Peak in the Hebra region. The eastern Hyrule Field lines up pretty nicely with the Thundra Plateau, and Death Mountain, which in Twilight Princess has always looked like it's in a suspended state of destruction, lines up with the yawning chasm known as the Breach of Demise. Sounds very much like the beginning of a calamity if you ask me. Zora's Domain also lines up with the Forgotten Temple. Auden Village has been swallowed up by the subduction at the end of Tenaga Canyon, and the Hebra West Summit and Sternia Basin were once encompassed by the old Gerudo Desert, maybe before the Leviathan that protected that area passed away, allowing for a cooler climate to take over. It's also worth noting that the Gerudo Desert was always completely separate from the Twilight Princess map and only accessible from fast travel methods, and so it's also possible to speculate that the actual location lay further beyond this area and maybe lay somewhere in this chasm or beyond. Even Snow Peak could have been placed in a slightly different location, as I've only traced this from the game map, and the location between Zora's Domain and the entrance to Snow Peak could have actually been a lot longer, given the vast differences in temperature between the two locations. I spent quite a long time looking at lakes, and one of the most fascinating things I always came back to was the Lake Hylia Bridge, but this is not the only bridge in Breath of the Wild, nor the only bridge in Twilight Princess. There's also the Elden Bridge. With that in mind, I looked at bridges in the Elden region of Breath of the Wild to see if there were anything that matched up with the Elden Bridge from Twilight Princess, and Nearby I found the Akala span, which could have been a reinforced version of the Elden Bridge. With this configuration, Zora's Domain lines up with the eastern reservoir of Breath of the Wild's namesake. This inlet in the northern Lanayru Hyrule Field from Twilight Princess and Castletown has eroded into Lake Akala, with Tarrytown being the only remnants. Lake Hylia has joined the Lanayru Sea at Malin Bay, along with the Gerudo Desert, a sort of reversal of how the sand sea of old Lanayru Desert and Skyward Sword had once been an actual ocean. The majority of the grasslands from Twilight Princess are all regions of Akala, with Auden Village nestled near Rook Woods. The glacier that was once Snow Peak has melted in this new climate, giving way to the Reservoir Lake and changing the flow of Zora's Domain from north to south. And the caldera for Death Mountain has shifted further along the fault line and created a new, more severe cone as it continues to be active, destroying the old Kakariko village in the process. Pretty good, huh? But this is still not my final conclusion. Just to put things in perspective for you all, Twilight Princess's map was only 2 kilometers from north to south, and Breath of the Wild's, on the other hand, was 6 kilometers, so we can fit 3 Twilight Princess maps in this space. I've been working with this rough scale in mind so far, except for when I was placing Lake Hylia to scale from both maps. It's actually a lot smaller in Twilight Princess. What I haven't done yet is look into my theory from the last video that the Twin Peaks could have once been called Death Mountain before it cracked in two and became dormant. If we overlay Death Mountain here, we get Kakariko Village lying in Tobio's Hollow, East Hyrule Field around Daya Village, and Papala Foothills, and even Lake Hylia falls in the same location with similar rivers that feed it along the same path. Hyrule Castle looks like it was swallowed up by the river. Farron Woods also matches up, but we have a similar issue with Snow Peak as in our second configuration. So let's rotate this so Snow Peak lines up with a better candidate, like, let's say, the frozen Mount Lanayru. Once we do this, we can see that Elden Bridge covers the canyon around Squabble River. Eastern Hyrule Field sits over what will one day be Ash Swamp, and the southern field over Rabia Plain, but Lake Hyrule, annoyingly, sits over Samasa Plain, which doesn't really match up. However, Hyrule Castle sits on the Phalian Highlands next to this mysterious Lanayru promenade, and Zora's Domain lies near the source of Squabble River. It's still not quite right. So next I thought to explore the promenade a little bit more, as it reminds me a lot of the inlet from Twilight Princess north of Castletown that leads into the moat. So lining it up in this fashion places Zora's Domain on Mount Lanayru, a place known to get frozen easily in Twilight Princess. It also places large sections of Hyrule Field over top of Blatchery Plain, Sahasra Slope and Rabia Plain, with the Lanayru wetlands lining up with the old Lake Hylia. We can also use our melting glacier theory to explain the loss of Snow Peak and the formation of this reservoir. All of that water would also explain how Gerudo Desert faded away into Trilby Valley. The old Kakariko village disappeared when the dueling peaks were formed and moved to where the old Castletown had once been, and Death Mountain almost lines up with Mount Flora. God, it's almost perfect. Auden Village even lies down where the ranch ruins are, over in Hyrule Field. And the Temple of Time is nearly in line with the Moor Garrison ruins. For my last trick, let's line up Zora's Domain from both games. Snow Peak runs west and ends up in Trilby Plains, assuming that Breath of the Wild's era's Death Mountain is still eons away from melting all of that ice. The Arbiter's Grounds lines up atop Krenel Peak, about to be transformed by all that runoff of fresh water from the melting ice. Lake Hylia is again atop the Lanayru wetlands, which will soon fill with silt from the changing landscape, and Twilight Princess's Death Mountain is about to go dormant and become Mount Lanayru. Kakariko Village from Twilight Princess sits halfway between the new Kakariko and Hateno, as if the Sheikah and Hylians that lived in that village decided to split their populations in different directions at some point. The new Kakariko Village sits close to the old Temple of Time site. The promenade sits over top of this chasm from Hyrule Field. Auden Village also sits in the Jaya Highlands, and the old Hyrule Castletown lies upon Rabia Plain, with the castle disappearing into Rutalu River, which may have at one point been the moat around the castle. This is probably one of the best configurations I can come up with, but I do have one more theory. The ultimate theory, that these games were made to be entertaining, engaging, and to present a Hyrule that we have never seen before, so maybe they just disregarded what they'd done before, That theory is almost definitely true, but it is fun nonetheless to speculate over Hyrule that we used to know and whether or not it may be hidden somewhere in this new world. It's something that other developers who have taken inspiration from the Zelda theories stick to really well, such as the Fable series where you come back to Albion time and time again and the same world is still there hidden beneath, but we're just focusing on a slightly different area or a transformation of what we once knew. And I really appreciate that developers take the time to do that and hope that the team behind Breath of the Wild have hidden the old maps somewhere here that we're just not seeing yet. Anyway, that's all I have for theories for you today, so thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Let me know which of these configurations you like the best, and if you haven't seen it already, I'll link the first part of the video here at the end of this one, just so you can catch up on that. There's also a link to some shenanigans as well, where we try and break the rules to get through shrines faster, so check that out if that floats your boat. And guys, be sure to subscribe to stay up to date. I'll be tackling Skyward Sword maps next, just as soon as I can be motivated enough to recreate the Skyward Sword maps as I did here for Twilight Princess. I've been Unoriginal, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys again real soon.